There are some who seek sustenance and support for grand plans and great undertakings that have excited their minds and stimulated their adventure. Some who seek the power and the strength to forgive someone who has wronged them. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Others would a stone for shelter, yet they sing. He who works in the night fulfills their needs, and the dew of his grace is upon their petals. And once again I heard him say, remember this, a thief is a man in need. A liar is a man in fear. The hunter who is hunted by the watchman of your night is also hunted by the watchman of his own darkness. I would have you pity them all. Should they seek your house, see that you open your door and bid them sit at your board. If you do not accept them, you shall not be free from whatever they have committed. And on a day I followed him to the marketplace of Jerusalem as the others followed him. And he told us the parable of the prodigal son and the parable of the merchant who sold all his possessions that he might buy a pearl. But as he was speaking, the Pharisees brought into the midst of the crowd a woman whom they called a harlot. And they confronted Jesus and said to him, she was taken in the act. And he gazed at her, and he placed his hand upon her forehead and looked deep into her eyes. And then he turned to the men who had brought her to him, and he looked long at them. And he leaned down, and with his finger he began to write upon the earth. He wrote the name of every man, and besides the name he wrote the sin that every man had committed. And as he wrote, they escaped in shame into the streets. And ere he had finished writing, only that woman and ourselves stood before him. And again he looked into her eyes, and he said, you have loved very much. They who brought you here loved but little, but they brought you as a snare for my ensnaring. And now go into peace. None of them is here to judge you. And if it is in your desire to be wise, even as you are loving, then seek me, for the Son of Man will not judge you. And I wondered then whether he said this to her because he himself was not without sin. But since that day I have pondered long, and I know now that only the pure of heart forgive the thirst that leads to dead waters, and only the sure of foot can give a hand to him who stumbles. And again and yet again I say, the bitterness of death is less bitter than life without him. The continuation of our thinking together about the parables. This morning we're dealing with two of the very striking parables of Jesus, and they have to do with forgiveness of sin. Very simple stories they are. One of them has a dramatic setting. A Pharisee, and I hope you will bear in mind that most of the New Testament references to the Pharisees are references that reflect a judgmental attitude towards the Pharisee that is not really a part of the genius of the Pharisaic movement in Israel. It is a reflection of another kind of attitude, another kind of prejudice. And this, of course, is nothing new, nothing radical. It's an old, familiar thing to those persons who have made any study of either the Pharisees or the Sadducees or of Israel or the life of Jesus, for that matter. But this man was a Pharisee, nevertheless. And he invited Jesus, along with his other friends, to dinner. And in those days, you ate with an exposure to the street. That is, the room had an exposure to the street, and strangers could drop in if they walked by and they saw you in there eating, and they remembered they wanted to talk with you about something. That's a good time to talk with you. You are relaxed and you're in a good mood, and if the food is good, you are apt to give a positive and favorable reaction. So people came in and out, as the case may have been. And then while everybody was eating and everything was lovely, this woman came in. And it was very interesting because time stood still when she appeared. And why did time stand still? Because every man there, every person there, every guest, including Jesus himself, knew what kind of woman she was. In ordinary language, she was a woman of the street, prostitute. Now here's the setting. Here is the Pharisee, the guest. On the one hand, the host rather, Jesus, the guest, and the woman. And what do you think was going on in everybody's mind? Interesting question. And evidently great was the relief when the woman came in and she went straight to Jesus. And doubtless Simon drew a sigh of relief. But it faced him with another problem. And when the woman came to Jesus, she fell at his feet, pulled the pin out of her hair, and it fell over on his feet, covering his feet. And according to this picture, she kissed his feet. The ultimate act of humility and self-abasement, the radical and dramatic expression of a sense of unworthiness. And under the cover of her hair, her eyes became fountains of tears as she bathed his feet with the tears of her anguish. And then everybody began reacting. And they said, "You have no right to be here. This is no place for you. You are outside of the pale, outside of the protection and the guarantors of respectability." Some man writing about her said, and he calls it by the name Mary, but I think that's a mistake. But nevertheless, this is what he says. Once I was white as the snow, but I fell like a snowflake from heaven to hell, fell to be trampled as filth in the street, fell to be laughed at, spit on, and beat. Cursing, pleading, dreading to die, selling my soul to whoever would buy, dealing in shame for a morsel of bread, hating the living and fearing the dead. O merciful God, have I fallen so low? And once I was pure as the beautiful snow. Then Jesus took over. And what did he do? He told a story. There was a man who... Let me read the story to you. And Jesus answering said unto him, Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And he saith, Master, say on. There was a certain creditor who had 2 debtors. The one owed 500 pence and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? And Simon said, Well, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most. And he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. And he turned to the woman, and he said unto her, Simon, seest thou this woman? I entered into thine house, thou gavest me no water for my feet. She hath washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Thou gavest me no kiss, but this woman since the time I came in hath not ceased to kiss my feet. My head with oil thou didst not anoint, but this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins which are many are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. Now that's the story. The measure of my sense of need for forgiveness is the measure of my outgoing. to meet the need for forgiveness in others. Very simple. Very simple. Now, there's one little question I'd like to raise before I go to the second one. One little question. Does it mean that... Why is it that the person who gives you the most trouble, seems to get closest to your heart? Do you believe that? Were you one of 2 or 3 children in the family, and you were very good? So you don't know what I'm talking about, but but the child that was always in difficulties. And I've thought about it a great deal. Of course, if you're a parent, you spend more time talking. Parents spend more time talking together about the child that's giving them trouble. Isn't that right? They do more soul searching about that. Because one of the things they're trying to do, it seems to me, is to be sure that they can rid themselves of a feeling of guilt about it. You know, because they, even though they know that the child got these discrepancies out of the blue, that they didn't come from any kind of inheritance or any lack of parental guidance and example. But where did they come from? They must have come from somewhere, and then you look at each other, and you know that, and then you talk about other aspects of it. But the result is that more of you has to be given as the whole part of you tracks down the limitations and the inadequacies of the loved one and wraps its health around it, hoping that redemption will be possible. And you never give up. Now, if it happens that the person feels consciously in need of forgiveness, then a new dimension of the possibilities of redemption takes place. For you see, even where you're dealing with an individual who is stubborn and unyielding and recalcitrant, who has no sense of the need for forgiveness, yet if you love, the love envelops and keeps trying to break down the inner resistance of the other person until that person from within starts moving from there towards you to meet the great creative love which you hold in your heart. But if there is a stirring in the other person, if the other person has a need, a sense need for forgiveness, and tries to work it out, tries to move towards the help that is being offered to him, then love becomes magnificent. Now, the person who should be most sensitive to the needs of others, most sensitive to the transgressions of others, is the person who is most deeply conscious of his own transgressions. There is no more tragic person in the world than a person who is incapable of having a sense of error in him. Have you ever seen anybody like that? You may be mistaken, but that person is never mistaken. Do you know how difficult it is to get to them? Have you ever tried? Thank God I'm pure. Have you ever tried to deal with someone like that? Not a chance. Now the second parable grows right out of this one. And that parable is of a man who owed a vast sum of money. If you measured the scriptural reference in terms of dollars, it would be something like $2 million. And he said to the man to whom he owed the money, I'm very sorry, but I can't pay it. It's more than I can pay, more than I can ever pay. And the man to whom he was indebted said, well, all right. If you can't do it, then let's forget it. Let's forget it. I'll wipe it off and let you start all over again with your life. I will not handicap you further with a burden that you can't carry. Oh, thank you so much. Now I can go on living. And when he walked around the corner, he ran into a man who owed him about $2.25. And he said, I've been looking all over for you. And this man said, well, you know, I was trying to find you, and I'm very sorry, but I can't pay you. I don't have it. Well, you know what he said. I must have mine. Oh, Jesus was wonderful, wasn't he? He just knew, he could just put his finger right on the spotlight so it could turn its rays on when you weren't expecting any light at all. If it is something that I owe you, I want mercy. If you owe me, I want mine. How perfectly natural that is. And why is it true? Because it is so difficult for us to deal honestly with ourselves. When I watch you do something, I'm apt to have an attitude of judgment towards it, but towards you and towards the doing of it. But when I do that thing, then I deal with it in an entirely different manner. If I try to get everything I can for myself, I'm just being wise, protecting myself against a rainy day. If you try to do it, then you're unscrupulous, you're an exploiter, you're X, you're Y. It's curious, isn't it? Now Jesus said something very simple. That I can only seek forgiveness from God for the sins which I've committed, for the error, if I am willing to forgive people for the things they do to me. You believe that? You believe that? That if I'm hard-hearted, if I'm unyielding, if I insist that the thing that happened to me was so terrible that I can't forgive you, then every time I fall upon my unrepentant knees, either actually or figuratively, seeking the forgiveness of God in order that my own spirit may have a sense of freedom, of movement, then the thing that stands between me and that forgiveness is your face. I can't get to God because every time I start, you're in the way. There's only one way I can get you out of my path, and that is to forgive you out. And until I do that, I can't get to God. Jesus illustrated in another way that in going to the temple to bring your gift, if when you get to the temple with your gift, you remember that your brother has aught against you, not that you have aught against your brother. It's easy if you remember that because you can't forget that. But that you remember that your brother has aught against you, that somebody is holding this thing against you, and you know it. And you say, well, it isn't my fault. Just let him do it. I'm not responsible for that. But Jesus says, if you remember that someone has aught against you, leave your gift. Don't try to fool God. Don't do that. That isn't healthy. Leave your gift. Go and find the person. Find the person who has this ill will against you, and then work out a reconciliation. And that is very instructive, because there is no experience in which you have been injured by another person in which you do not share some of the guilt. There is no such thing as a one-sided judgment in that particular. Examine carefully, under the light of your best judgment and your most enlightened wisdom, any situation of conflict that you're having right now with someone. Think about it for a moment, if you are having. And you are sure that all the guilt is on one side. If you examine it very carefully, you will discover that you share the responsibility. That much, so much, that is not good has flown from you to other people. That more and more as you deepen your own sense of religious values and spiritual experience, more and more you will learn that you must be gracious towards other people for so much that is not good that flows from them to you. You are not without guilt, and therefore no forgiveness can take place unless it is mutual. The person who has injured me, yes, I can only forgive him when in my own heart and mind with great honesty I ask him to forgive me. And then when I do that, I can pray to God. Asking God to forgive me even as I forgive others. And if you are the kind of person who doesn't pray, and therefore what I'm saying about praying to God for forgiveness is a thing you don't do, and therefore this does not involve you, you're just mistaken. Because sooner or later, you will come to your knees, seeking something that will so operate on your insides that you will be free again. Might have less heaviness of heart, that you may be able to look into the eyes of another person or that person and feel no ill will, no judgment. That whatever the process is by which that takes place in you, it adds up to this, that you are trying in the process so to settle your account with life that life will begin to flow freely through you again. And in the language of religion, that is the forgiveness of God. And if I don't seek it, I can't get along. Because no one of us is free from hurting other people. And every time you do, you throw out of line the relationship that guarantees your sense of wholeness. And you can be yourself as long as you hold in yourself the kind of thoughts and attitudes that keep other people from being themselves. I seek the forgiveness of God, not because I'm worthy of it, but because it is the only practical way by which I can live without an increasing disintegration.
thought it's some new constellation men would wonder at. Perhaps it's just a firework, flash, fizz, splat. Then darker darkness, scorched pasteboard and sour smoke. But God, the thought was great. The scheme, the dream, right to the first charm broke. The thing just built itself while I, elate, laughed and admired it. Then it stuck half done. The lesser half worse luck. You see, it's dead as yet, a frame, the body and the heart, the soul, the fiery, vital part to give it life is what I cannot get. I've tried to snatch live fire and pour cold ashes. Every spark has died. It won't come right. I've got the thing entire. Only I can't. I love my job. You ride the thunder. Do you know what it is to dream and drudge and throb? I wonder. Did it come at you with a rush? Yes, with red face and sparkling eyes, swinging the hot globe out between the skies, marking the new seas with their white beach lines, sketching in sun and moon, the lightning and the rains, sowing the hills with pines, wreathing a rim of purple round the plains. I know you laughed then, as you caught and wrought the first swift, rapturous outline